everybody. It's Bruce McCarthy, founder of Product Culture. Today, I'm going to talk to you about one of the key skills for product people, and that's prioritization. And unfortunately, prioritization means saying no to some things, even good ideas, in order to get to the really great ideas that are going to make a difference. First, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a longtime product guy. I've worked for or as a coach with many organizations in the software and related businesses all over the world, big and small. And I've played a lot of different roles, both product people, and I've been officially or unofficially in charge of all sorts of related roles like engineering, agile, UX, business development, data, you name it. And as a result of all of that, if I have a superpower, what I'd say it is seeing how all the pieces fit together in a really high-functioning product culture. I actually wrote a book on product roadmaps. It's here from O'Reilly a couple of years ago with 3 co-authors. And it's been hugely successful and popular all around the world. In fact, there's versions in several different languages right now, if that's your preference. And one of the key topics we talk about in putting together a compelling roadmap is ruthless prioritization, is making sure that you're tackling the things that are going to make the most difference before things that are going to make less difference. Let me tell you a story to really set up why this is important about my first month as VP of Product at a startup. When I arrived, I think I was employee number 23 or something like that. We had one successful product, and we were thinking about, well, what should we be doing next? And there were a lot of competing ideas. Every executive, every stakeholder had their laundry list of ideas of things that we should be working on, or maybe we already were working on, they thought. And that list went on for over 100 different rows in my spreadsheet of ideas as I went around and collected them. Unfortunately, we still had a pretty small team, as startups do, and we probably had the bandwidth to do maybe 3 or 4 things out of that 100 or so things that we could or should be working on. And I kind of felt like this cartoon, which the Product Management Journal put together a few years ago from a talk that I did at Product Camp, of the product guy in the middle being surrounded by all the stakeholders all around the business, each of whom thinks that their favorite or pet project or feature or bug fix or new initiative is the most important one and should be at the top of the list. And it can be daunting as a product person to try to reconcile all of those priorities and really get down to what's the most leveraged. For me, there are a few principles that you really have to bear in mind with prioritization. You really have to cherry pick the most leveraged ideas, the 10x ideas, the ones that will make an enormous, immediate, and measurable difference to the success of your customers and of your business. You can't spend time on ideas that sound good, that are merely adequate, that are merely something you probably should do, because you don't have time to do that whole list of things. And critically, you need to focus not on what are we building or fixing or enhancing, but why. What result are we hoping to get? You need to focus on the desired outcomes for your customers and for your business, not on the specific deliverables, initiatives, features, fixes, releases, etc. Those will come, but first you need to start with why. And I think you need to really think about what are your criteria for, and what is your process for ranking these ideas. There are lots of very common, but not really great ideas about how to prioritize. First of all, your gut or your executive's gut or your CEO's gut is how a lot of decisions often get made, but it's not data-driven. It's probably out of date, based on out of date information, especially founding CEOs, I find, who probably were close to the problem, probably started the company because they were passionate about solving a problem out in the market some years ago, have now moved on to managing a large team, managing the growth of the company, relationships with the boards, relationships with key customers, raising money. They're no longer in touch with the average customer, and ranking ideas about what the customer will want based on that kind of gut feel that hasn't been trained with close touch with lots of customers every day is risky. Analysts, I'm not really a fan. Mostly what they're telling you is straight line extrapolation of the past, and you need to be driving the future. Popularity, I'm really not a fan of voting on features. Most of your customers, in terms of numbers, do not provide most of your revenue as a successful product or a successful organization. Most of them are small, and so when you add up their votes, well, product strategy really isn't and shouldn't be a democracy. And what's worse, if you're thinking about moving to a different market segment, maybe moving up market or moving to a different market, the votes of your existing customers in your previous target markets are not going to be helpful as you move. Sales requests, very tactical. They depends on what deal is in play or was recently lost or won. Services requests, often much more data-driven than others. If they can tell you where most of the trouble or complaints come in, that's worth thinking about. But those are mostly incremental improvements to your existing product. And if you're really thinking about how do I move the needle in my business, how do I come up with the next big thing, the next big engine of growth, then you're not going to get that from services requests either. There are a lot of methods out there for prioritization. Maybe you've heard of the Kano model or the Moscow should have, could have, won't have kind of model. Feasibility, desirability, viability, that's very popular. I'm going to walk you through my favorite way of prioritizing to try to get you out of this jam. I think there are three elements to clear prioritization. Clear objectives, simple math. I'm going to walk you through the math. I promise it's simple, and good discussions. If you can have those three things, you can come to alignment within your organization on what's most important and most leveraged. So let's talk about the first one, objectives. Objectives are really the source of truth for your prioritization. They're what drive your priorities. Whenever anybody suggests we should do something, your question should be, why? What do we expect to happen? What problem are we trying to solve? What I'm trying to make is a distinction between means and ends. And if someone says, well, I think we should do an HTML5 redesign, and you ask the question, well, why might we do that? Well, we might do that because we believe that it will grow the lifetime value of our customers because they will be able to access our SaaS tool on multiple platforms more easily. And that'll increase the amount of value that they get from us, the amount of places and times and settings in which they can use us, and it will grow the lifetime value of that customer. Why should we consider integrating our tool with Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn? Well, maybe that'll help our customers talk about what they're doing in our product, with our product, and how they're succeeding publicly, and that'll help us grow. Why should we consider granting customer requests, the most frequent ones, like I was saying earlier about voting? Well, at some point when your product is mature and you're not really growing in terms of new customers anymore, it might make sense to keep your current customers happy by giving them, being able to say yes to their customer requests and keeping them from going shopping and looking at the competition. Maybe revenue, maybe that's an end rather than a means. Yeah, I think revenue is an end rather than a means, but I think we can be a little bit smarter about when we're defining our desired outcomes, what we're looking for in terms of revenue. Growing recurring revenue is different than growing upfront one-time revenue. Growing margin is different than growing top-line revenue. So being specific allows you to be a little more nuanced in your prioritization as well. Scalability, I frequently have people saying to me, obviously we need to prioritize scalability, and maybe I don't think product managers spend enough time thinking about that, but I'm not sure that exactly is an end in itself. I think it's a means to fulfilling more demand from customers. If you have more demand than you can fulfill, if you can't take on any more simultaneous users, but you could sell seats if you had them available, well then scalability makes sense as something for you to prioritize with the objective of fulfilling more demand in mind. And then I had a CEO once who said, what he really wanted to see on my list of things to do was transformational ideas. And I kind of munged on that for a little while because it was difficult for me to see that in terms of something concrete that I could do, or even what outcome we would be looking for from transformational ideas. And I thought about it and I realized that what he was asking for was he wanted us to leverage our existing IP, our assets, our technology, our team, our knowledge in new areas where we might be able to be disruptive. And that might lead over time to future engines of growth for the company. And that might be the outcome that we might get. So, all right, let's imagine that you started with a list of different deliverables and you managed to translate that into a small set of business objectives, of outcomes that you're looking for that allow you maybe to start your prioritization. What's the mathematical formula for translating objectives into priorities? Well, I'm going to tell you. I've developed something I call the ROI scorecard, and it's a very simple model that basically compares results to effort. The things that should or could or you believe will deliver the most value for the least effort should be the things that are highest on your priority list, right? They should be the things that you do first. If you can quickly begin to deliver some value, you can harvest that value, and that gives you the money, the bandwidth, the team, the runway that you need to work on the next priorities. So this is a simple return on investment or bang for the buck sort of formula, the sort of thing that people do to judge, I think, in the back of their minds automatically, but we're going to reduce it here to a simple mathematical formula. But let's define our terms. How do you tell value from effort? Well, the effort is the time and resources required to execute on an initiative. In most software companies, the constrained resource is engineering time. So you can measure effort probably in terms of how much effort is it going to be to develop this thing or to solve this problem. Value, on the other hand, is expected contribution to those business objectives that we were talking about earlier and to customer needs. So if we could measure both of these maybe and compare them, maybe we could come up with a prioritization. One of the key things here is to recognize that when you start talking about your business objectives, most organizations and most software teams have more than one goal, more than one business objective. They want to grow the number of customers, but they also want revenue and they also want profit. Or they want any number of other business objectives. I think it would be possible to have a scorecard with way too many objectives on it and make it difficult to use. I recommend that the sweet spot is somewhere around 3, between 2 and 4 business objectives that you're shooting for is manageable and usually covers most of what you're trying to accomplish. So you can actually go through, take an idea like your proposed HTML5 redesign, and you can score it against your business objectives. And if you have 3 business objectives, well, you have 3 scores and you can add them up, and that gives you your total value for that particular idea in terms of its ability to deliver on your business objectives. In theory, there can be different types of effort as well. You could have both research effort as well as engineering effort, or design as well as engineering, or marketing could have its own type of effort. In practice, though, it's often simple enough and straightforward enough to have just one effort term in your formula, and that's the development effort. I'm going to add one other element to this formula, and that is confidence. Confidence is sort of the inverse of risk. It's your confidence, that your certainty that your scores are correct, that the level of effort you think is correct. You haven't done it yet, so you can't be 100% confident, and that the ideas that you have will, your confidence that they will deliver the value that that you estimate. Again, you won't know for sure until you test them out in the world with customers. So all of this is a little bit of a guess up front, and your confidence score allows you to set your level of confidence in those guesses. If you really have never done something like this before and you've not tested it with customers, your confidence is probably low. If you have, if this is another feature like one you've done before that was a crowd pleaser before, well, then your confidence is probably high. So you can take those value over effort scores, multiply them by your confidence score, and you get a simple prioritization score. Let me show you what this looks like in practice, give you an example. So I don't know how many of you maybe saw a couple of years ago, Elon Musk got up and gave us his presentation on the roadmap to Mars as CEO of SpaceX. And he outlined in it, it was actually a really great roadmap presentation, 4 problems they needed to solve in order to make going to Mars an economically viable plan. Full reusability of the rockets, refueling in orbit, propellant production for the return trip on Mars, and the right chemical propellant that had the right performance characteristics and could be produced on Mars. And if you imagine that Elon had 3 different objectives that might be about affordability and reliability or whatever, you could imagine that he could go through and do a scoring of each one of these 4 characteristics, these 4 problems that he felt were important to solve, as to how much value they were going to deliver and how much effort they were going to entail. Here we've used a very simple scale. I'll get to that more in a minute. If we look at the full reusability problem to solve, its value to helping out with objective 1, which maybe would be reliability, is 2. 2 out of a possible 2, so it's high. And its value to objective number 2, whatever that is, maybe cost, is also 2. And for number 3, it's also 2. So it gets the maximum score of 6 out of a possible 6. And the effort turns out to be relatively low. Effort is only 1. So 6, 2 plus 2 plus 2, 6, divided by 1 equals 6. And maybe confidence that we can achieve that, and that it will, if we do achieve it, it will deliver the value, is 75%. So 75% of 6 is 4.5. You go through and you do the scores for all the other things. Maybe the right propellant doesn't have any value to objective number 1, but it has high value to objective number 3, for example. And maybe it's greater effort, an effort of 2. So that's 2 divided by 2 is 1. And we're only 10% confident in that. So you get a really low priority score. And these ranked scores at the end just tell you, well, which ones of these things should we work on first? We should work on reusability first. And in fact, if you've been following the recent launches of the Falcon rockets, that's exactly what they've been focused on, is being able to bring the rockets back down safely so they can be reused. You can use exactly this formula in a spreadsheet very simply for your feature prioritization, for your problem prioritization, for your initiative prioritization. Just make sure you're comparing apples to apples. Now you'll notice I'm using a very simple scale here. I think it's actually a mistake to try to get overly precise about your estimates. I don't think you should be using person months or sprints for your effort estimates. I don't think you should be using dollars for your revenue estimates. It gets you into too many arguments about precisely, well, is it a $950,000 or does it cross the $1 million threshold in opportunity? I don't know. And actually, it's not that important at this stage. We're not actually trying to do a project plan yet, so precise estimates not necessary. And we're not actually trying to do a revenue forecast, so precise revenue estimates not necessary. All we're trying to do is rank these things and see which ones are more promising than the others. We can then delve in more depth into the ones that rise up to the top. So I like simple scales like t-shirt sizing. My favorite scale actually for prioritization is 0, 1, or 2. 0 means, or it's sort of high, medium, and low, right? And 0 means it's low. In fact, I'm discounting low down to 0 because I don't really care about things that have a low ROI. And 1 is medium and 2 is high. Exactly how high is high? It doesn't matter. It just means relative to the other things, it's high. Okay, so you can do a scorecard like this. That's great. You're done, right? Well, no. Actually, if you remember, I said there are 3 things that are necessary for good prioritization. One is the objectives. The second one is the math. And we've talked about both of these now. But the third one is good conversations. It's no good coming up with the perfect mathematically derived spreadsheet of priorities if you can't get buy-in from the people who are going to do the work, or the people who are going to benefit from the work, or the people who are going to fund the work. You need buy-in from all those key stakeholders. Okay, how do we do that? Well, I've developed this method over time that I call shuttle diplomacy. And maybe you'll recognize our former Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, here. The term was actually coined for his efforts in negotiating peace in the early 70s in the Middle East between people running countries in the Middle East who would not meet directly with each other or speak directly to each other. He had to be the go-between. He had to shuttle, literally on an airplane, back and forth between the capitals of different countries in the Middle East. And to each, he represented the interests of the others so that he could be the person who centrally crafted a plan by working with all of the different parties. This is a key skill for product people to get alignment on any given plan. And I recommend that you do eventually pull together a big meeting for approval of your plan. But before you do that, you do your shuttle diplomacy. You go one-on-one to the different executives or stakeholders or engineering people or customers or partners or whoever's buy-in you need, and you listen to them. And then you can have the big meeting with the whole team. When you talk to people one-on-one, you don't say to them, all right, here's my plan, do you approve? I need your signature. You say to them, I'm working on my priorities. I have a draft. It's work in progress. I need your help. Would you give me your input? Then we'll go over the parts of it that you really care about, that you think are really important or really not important. We'll come to some sort of alignment or at least understanding between you and me before I move on to the next one. And then by the time I've made all the rounds, to all of the stakeholders, I've got a pretty good picture of what the organization thinks, and hopefully I've been able to pull together some sort of alignment on where we should go. This really worked for me in my first month as VP at that startup. I put together my spreadsheet. I got alignment on what were the business objectives. I did my shuttle diplomacy. And when I got the executive team together, in about an hour and a half, we were able to narrow down that list of 100 things to the few things, single digits of things that we were going to work on in the immediate future. Other things that needed more research before we really could say whether they were going to be winners or not. And then other things that we thought we're not going to do anytime soon because the scores weren't there. The ROI was not there. There was a product guy who'd been at the company for 2 years before I joined, and he came out of that meeting with his jaw on the floor. He said to me, "That was magic. How did you get those executives, high-powered people who had never really been able to see eye to eye on anything before, to come to alignment so quickly?" And I said, it wasn't magic. It was those three things: clear objectives, a little bit of math, and good conversations. It was just having a reasonable process to come to alignment. It was these three things, again. If this is interesting, I'd be pleased to have you come and check out my website, productculture.org, where I write frequently about these kinds of skills, tips, tricks for product people, and also about the characteristics of highly successful product teams and product-led companies. I have a weekly nano letter that's meant to fit on your phone without any scrolling, just exactly the right length for reading in line for coffee. It's called One Thing on Product Culture. And if you come to my website, you can subscribe. I hope this has been interesting. I've really enjoyed presenting to you, and keep making things awesome.